All right, welcome back to the Everything Firearms Podcast. This is Will once again back, and then once again joining me here is Darryl. And the one thing I will say is kind of an announcement. I put on the YouTube community thing earlier in the week that there was an announcement coming about this. But Darryl is going to be joining us here on this weekly. We'll have to figure that all out, but it'll be an honor and a privilege to have you here.
Well, I greatly appreciate that.
Yeah, it's going to be very exciting, and this week we have a great episode planned here. We're going to talk about some BC and SD, or ballistics coefficients, and sectional density. We can get into that now. Those are topics that I think most reloaders and shooters should know. You probably have never really looked into a deep dive into it because there's a lot of people on some side of the spectrums that are look at ballistics coefficients like the gospel, and there's other guys who don't really pay much attention to it. Maybe more of the smaller caliber, 22 caliber guys. It's hard to find good BC bullets in those calibers, but and then sectional density. You're probably better at explaining it than I am. So if you want to explain those two and then how we can, I guess, calculate that, and then we can, crunch some numbers and look at different calibers and everything and go from there.
Certainly. So we'll start with sectional density because it's the easiest to explain. Sectional density is just a product of your bullet's mass and its diameter. So if you have two bullets that are the exact same diameter, the exact same weight, it doesn't matter their shape, length, any of that, they are going to have the exact same sectional density. So as an example here, I've got two bullets pulled up on Hornaday's website. We've got part number 2550. That is a 25 caliber, 117 grain round nose. Sectional density listed is 0.253. And part number 2552, that is a 117 grain interlock, so boat tail soft point now, versus your flat base round nose. Sectional density is identical at 0.253. Sectional density, because it's related to bullet diameter and mass, you can kind of use it as a gauge of what type of penetration you could see. And a lot of guys go off of that number for that reason. They'll get into like 338 caliber stuff or 358 caliber stuff because on paper the sectional densities are better, and therefore on paper they should penetrate better. There's two problems that you run into when you just kind of play off a sectional density, and that's where ballistics coefficient comes into play, right? One problem you run into is that if your bullet's not aerodynamic enough, even though it's got this great high sectional density, it is going to lose velocity at further range. So when it actually impacts the animal, another big portion of your penetration is your impact velocity. If your bullet's only doing 200 or 300 feet per second by the time it gets to the animal, which that's absolutely outrageous, but a good example, you're barely going to see any penetration at all versus if a smaller, lower sectional density bullet were to get out there at 22, 2300 feet per second. Obviously, it's going to be much better penetration potential, I will say. Because you run into another problem. And Ron Spomer explained this best. Sectional density never changes, except it actually does. So when that bullet gets to the animal, hits the animal, especially if it is an expanding type bullet, it's going to begin expanding. Now, we mostly see this with lead jacketed bullets. As it begins to expand, it's going to start losing weight. Some of that jacket's going to shear off. Maybe the bullet loses its jacket entirely. Pieces of the core is going to come off. So the mass of the bullet is going to go down as it goes through the animal. As the mass is going down, sectional density starts going down as well. So if you have a bullet that's designed to expand very rapidly and achieve a large amount of expansion, as it's going through that process, its sectional density is going to start decreasing. Whereas if you had a bullet that maybe started with a little bit lower sectional density, but was more dense design, doesn't expand as violently, it might wind up with a higher sectional density after you take that bullet away. I believe in the video where Ron Spelmer talks about variable sectional density, he does weigh two bullets, one that was slightly over uh, when the bullet was in its perfect unfired form, and one that was slightly under, and the two flip flop places, if I'm remembering right. Uh, so that's sectional density in a nutshell. That's why a lot of guys kind of use that number, right? Ballistics coefficient. That's another number that guys see and helps them decide what bullet they're going to be using for whatever they might be doing. There's a couple problems with ballistics coefficient as well that we're just now starting to see get rectified, but there's some problems that you should be aware of. Ballistics coefficient, a lot of people think it's the bullet's ability to cut through the air, which is kind of half of it. It's more the relation of the bullet and its ability to maintain velocity. So a bullet that's more capable of maintaining velocity will have a higher ballistics coefficient, higher BC. And that all has to do with air drag. Greater the air drag, quicker the bullet's going to slow down. Now, with BC, Bill, Will, are you familiar with G1 and G7, what those are?
Um, so that's I've heard of them. I'll be honest with you, I used to understand what they are, but I like it's not something that I'm not tuned up on it, so I'm gonna say no.
So your G's, as I'll call them, are pretty simple. One actually makes things a little more complex than the other. There's actually 9 G's. So you've got G1 through 7, or G1 through 8, sorry, and GL. And each one of those represents what we would call a standard projectile. So there's some different form of a projectile that we would shoot. G1, it's called an Ingalls projectile. That is like your stereotypical bullet. It's flat base, pointed tip, basically what we've been shooting 1900s into 1920s, 1930s. We finally started boat tailing stuff. G7 is a newer model that has started to model boat tail designs. So they're not foolproof because they still take in certain measurements and whatnot into account. But G7, when you're using a more modern boat tail design, is a much more accurate simulation. Now, funnily enough, of all these different G's that we have, GL is a lead blunt-faced bullet. So somewhere along the lines of coming up with these formulas, somebody thought it was a good idea to measure the ballistics coefficient of wad cutters. I don't.
Yeah.
I've never seen revolver shooting competition with wad cutters at 1,000 yards. Maybe that's something we'll do on the channel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, talking about the two common G's, G1, G7. G1 presents a lot of problems, but it is the most common because for however many years now, and even still now, we still use flat-based bullets, right? G1 is a variable ballistic coefficient. It's what a lot of people don't realize with it. The way that number is calculated is variable based on the velocity of the bullet. And that oftentimes isn't taken into consideration. So I've got two more bullet examples pulled up here. And one of them I've pulled up because it's a Hornady bullet where they have the G7 included as well. This bullet I have here is part number 2635. It is the 143 grain ELDX 6.5 diameter bullet. The ballistic coefficient for G1 is a 0.625 ballistic coefficient. That sounds pretty high. The G7 coefficient is 0.315, much, much lower. Now, here's the problem. This is one of the big reasons G1 is still used, at least according to Berger, who helped design the G7 platform, is because the number is so big, it's easier to sell. Guys are looking for ballistic coefficient. They're saying, oh, 7.7 BC, that's the bullet for me. When in reality, that number is going to be variable over the velocity range. Depending on the velocity you're starting at, you might not even ever see that 0.7, or in this case, 0.625. One example where we can see that, Sierra Bullets, for whatever reason, big competition bullet maker, they still use G1. Probably because it was the industry standard for so long, but you see a lot of guys, Hornady, Berger, they're all using G7s now in their more modern bullets where G7 is applicable. Sierra is not. So I have pulled up here Sierra's 144 grain hollow point boat tail match game. It's another 0.264 diameter bullet, 6.5 diameter bullet. Part number on this for anyone interested is 1744. Its maximum BC, G1 BC, is 0.550. But that's at 2,800 feet per second and higher. Once you get between 28 and 2,000, they're claiming the BC is now 0.541. 2,000 and below, it's now 0.536. And I'm sure as the velocity bleeds off, there's actually a finer taper there. It's not just a sudden step. So as you go drastically below 2,000, it's going to start going down. So not a great nor accurate example of BC, but it was the industry standard we had. Going to G7. This is why the smaller numbers are better. Where applicable, and I say that because G7 only applies to boat tails. You can't use a G7 on a flat base bullet. So flat base bullets, until somebody comes up with a standard that gets rid of that variability, you're stuck figuring all that mess out. G7, the way it was designed, the coefficient listed, it doesn't matter if the bullet's going 5,000 feet per second or if I throw it at you, that ballistic coefficient will remain the same. So it's always 0.315. So when you start getting into longer range hunting applications, longer range target shooting applications, as you're doing your ballistics chart, your dopes, the ballistic coefficient is substantially more accurate. And while not 100% foolproof, obviously, it is so much more accurate that you've got without having to go through all that variability calculations, you plug in that one number and have a substantially higher chance of getting yourself on paper between 5 and 1,000 yards. Because if you're doing your dopes, it should go, you need 20 inches at 1,000 yards. Obviously, going to be more than that, but give myself 60 clicks, be 80 clicks really. And there I am. I'm on paper. So that's BC in a nutshell. Obviously, a substantially more complicated concept there. But to make it as simple as possible, those of you guys that are looking at BC, thinking it might be something that will affect your shooting discipline or how you plan on hunting, if you're hunting long range, try to find a bullet or get the measuring equipment you would need to be able to accurately measure your bullet's G7 if one's not provided, and use the G7 coefficient to help you get your dopes and everything uh, a lot more accurate than if you were going off of G1s, which antiquated technology. Let's shoot in flat base bullet. Then good luck, I guess.
Yeah. So, I guess where we can go from there is obviously, as you were saying, the marketability of the G1's chart is, you know, it has this high. I mean, obviously, if you figure the old standard of the old bullet technology has come a long way. So if we're basing the G1 off of the old, the old bullets that have there's really no, compared to what we have now with technology, they're not like the the Sierra, for example, the the Match King or the Game King. No, compared to what we were shooting back in 1904, it's more aerodynamic, it's better, sleek, it's gonna fly better. So obviously, like you were saying with the marketability of that, um, what would you say when you factor in like the G1 to the G7? Obviously, there's kind of like a mean, an average there. Would you say like what would you say for people looking who are concerned with their ballistics coefficient is a good average? Like if we're gonna look at here and we're gonna get a point 0.8, but on G1, but if we look at G7 and we find like a point 0.4, would you say like a point 0.6? Obviously, a point 0.6 is good. Well, what would you say should be the mean that we should be looking for our bullets for people concerned with that?
So when you say when you're talking about the mean, are you saying what is a good average
Yeah.
BC?
Yes.
So once again, it's all depending on what you're shooting because BC, that is a factor of bullet diameter, length, mass. All this affects your ballistics coefficient. So a 338, big, long, 350 grain 338 is going to have a massive ballistics coefficient versus something like a 165 grain 30 caliber bullet. But one obviously is going to be substantially better for your application than the other. So you need to look at your application first. Uh, if you're shooting a specific discipline, competition discipline that mandates, some of them mandate a caliber restriction, like maybe you have to use a 30 or you can't use anything over a 30. Typically, in those instances, you can't really necessarily go off of an average because you're also going to be shooting different cartridges. And a high BC might be great. Go for the highest BC you can get. But in your cartridge, that bullet is so heavy and so long that you're throwing it at a velocity that's just worthless. So instead of looking at an average, what I would recommend is look at how far you're shooting, figure out what you would need in terms of your ballistics trajectory, how much drop is going to be reliable for getting that on paper easier, and then start picking around a bullet that weight wise, length wise will let you get that velocity and go from there with your BC. If I'm shooting a bullet, say I've got a BC of 0.6, and I can throw that bullet at 2,700 feet per second. But I got a bullet that's a 580 and I can throw it 3,000. Eventually, there's going to be a point where that higher BC bullet is going to start seeing less drop over an extended range. But if I'm shooting 300-yard competition, that higher BC bullet might be worthless because its velocity is low enough. I'm going to see more drop to that distance. So based off of the distance you're going to be shooting at, figure out what velocity might be optimum for your cartridge to get a good flat trajectory to help you out. And then find the best BC bullet you can find that's there, because one manufacturer's bullet and another manufacturer's bullet could be very close in length, very close in weight. So pressure-wise, not much difference going on there. Velocity will be the same, or close to it. But the taper of the nose might be a little sharper on one versus the other, and the BC could be different enough to make a difference.
Okay, so then another thing, you kind of play devil's advocate, and it's a good thing with that you said about the caveat with ballistics coefficient is application, because now I'm gonna get some heat if the right people watch this, because I think you know where I'm gonna go with this,
I have
because
a feeling.
there's some people who like, and this is why I'm not the biggest. I don't look at ballistics coefficient as the gospel because my main application is hunting. Now, there's a certain group of riflemen who love a certain caliber, and it's very popular in the 6.5 Creedmoor, which is known for its ballistics coefficient. And on target practice, the 6.5 Creedmoor shines. I'm not saying it's not a good cartridge, because I think I'd be a fool, one, to say that, and two, it's taken the world by storm. I think it's kind of got a little bit of hate the last couple of years for its hunting, because people think it can do certain things, and they're asking of its bullet construction to do certain things, and that can be with any cartridge. If you use the wrong bullet in the wrong circumstances, you're going to see bad results. But I mean, just something like that. I mean, I think most of the time you're going to on a deer hunt, mule deer, coyote, fox, whatever you want to use your 6.5 Creedmoor for. If you use the right bullet, you're not going to have run into any issues. But when we look for these high BC match grade bullets and try to take it hunting, it's a bad thing. And I think that that's not as common when you look at the trusty old 30-06, which doesn't have the same BC or nothing, or the 243. I mean, I'm just saying, I'm not hating on the 6.5 Creedmoor, but it's not the hunting for practical application for hunting. It's not what some of the older, more FUD guns might be. And now the guys with their man buns can come after me and rake me over the coals.
So, and that was the thing with the 6.5 Creedmoor when that first came out. So, performance wise, 6.5 Creedmoor, it's compared quite frequently in our flood circles to the 6.5 by 55 Swede. That was the cartridge that the Swedish military used. So, back then, everyone had some different cool thing that they were using in their military issued rifles, and the Swedes went with a 6.5. And it was very accurate. Now, the problem was, just like anything else, twist rate was too slow to stabilize big, heavy bullets. So with the 6.5, bringing that to market first was great. You know, we can use these huge, long, honking bullets out of a factory rifle. And that's where the problem came in initially. as these big heavy bullets are being designed, a lot of them that were first coming out were match bullets. They were not designed for hunting applications, so they were not designed to expand, or at least expand reliably. And the ones that were being used out to ranges where you were starting to get within the velocity expansion threshold. And that's why we saw a lot of issues early on with that. Now there are better bullets now. We've started like Hornady makes. Trying to think of what they call that type of bullet. It's one of their ELD line of bullets, and it's specifically designed for long range. So the jacket's thinner, the core is a little softer, so it's designed to expand at a lower threshold. Whereas back then, the ELD matches really not designed to expand at all, and guys were trying to shoot animals with them. Of course, it's not going to work great. And even today, with some of these wildcats, as I mentioned in our last podcast, I'm looking at the 25 Creedmoor. There are guys that are shooting AMAX bullets out of this 25 Creedmoor. They're shooting animals with them. That bullet is not designed for that. And there's a lot of guys that are shooting AMAX bullets of various calibers on animals. Some of them are seeing good results. Some of them aren't, which is to be expected when you're shooting a bullet that has no reliable expansion capabilities. Sometimes it's going to work. Sometimes it's not. So you when you're looking at your BCs, once again, velocity, 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 that's everything. You've got to seriously ask yourself, I'm shooting this big high BC bullet, but my cartridge case is the size of a 6.5 Creedmoor. I'm not pushing it very fast to begin with. Is my bullet going to get to the animal at a speed that is going to allow the bullet to do what it's designed to do? And has the bullet I've chosen design-wise been designed for this task? In a lot of cases, we're starting to see that correction. Guys are able to get hunting ammo off the shelf in a higher BC bullet, like the ELD X. It's a good hunting bullet when it expands. But you still got guys that are pushing the limits of these smaller case capacity cartridges, and that's where you're getting a real bad rap. Just,
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, how many videos were out there of people shooting whitetail with a 6.5 and it just boop, 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 boop.
Yeah.
They're all over the internet when the 6.5 first came out.
Yeah, and I think that's when a lot of the guys who, I don't know, there's kind of a weird, well, at least I've kind of noticed it. There's obviously that cult-like following for the 6.5 Creedmoor, but there's also kind of the older guys who say that the 6.5 Creedmoor does not even do anything as good as what my 260 Remington does. So why do we need that? I mean, and I think you have an interesting discussion there because obviously your average shooter who doesn't reload or doesn't care that goes in and buys factory ammunition. They can walk in and pick up a Bergara 6.5 Creedmoor all day long, and they got thousands of choices for their ammunition. But the guy who's looking for a 260 Remington, I live half a mile from a gun shop. I might have to walk over to National tomorrow morning and say, "Hey, you guys got a 260 Remington?" They probably don't. And honestly, I don't know the last time I saw a 260 Remington on the shelf of ammunition. But
It's getting very hard to find. For that reason, 260 Remington, it's just Creedmoor with a slightly longer case. I actually just ran, the numbers here. On average, the case capacity for 260 is 53.5 grains. 6.5, 52.5 grains. So there's a grain of difference in terms of case capacity. And now, a part of that's because the 260 brass is a little thicker. That's the way the brass is designed. So varying brands, you could see more or less case capacity there. But that little bit of extra performance in terms of the velocity that it's capable of seeing, is it enough to make a difference? Well, if you're pushing a ragged edge of what you should be doing, the answer could be yes. It's like you said, the big thing's availability of the ammunition. So even if you're a 260 guy, you can't find that ammo, by going to the 6.5 Creedmoor, you can find similar bullet designs. Like they make interlocks in 6.5 Creedmoor now. So you can get the more typical hunting bullets and still use basically the same thing. I'm a big proponent of the 308 Winchester size case. Like especially when you start playing around with some of the different case brands, you might find one that's like 54.5 grains or more. The only reason I went, or that I'm going, I don't have my barrel yet, 25 Creedmoor, is Hornaday's making brass for it now. There is a Wildcat in the 308 Winchester that's a 25 caliber. It's called 25 Super. Soup like you eat soup, not like super strong. Why the guy named it that, I don't know. But it's a great cartridge. Everything about it. It's substantially cheaper for me to get a chamber reamer in 25 Creedmoor and get a little bit less performance. I'm not shooting a ragged edge. So for me, the deer's not going to know the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. So then I guess another good way we can look at this is, I guess, to connect them. So, and because you've looked at sectional density and penetration side, and the with BC, with there's more to it, but just for the sake of time here, the flight side of it. Um, so I guess what we can do is, what do you think are some of the best calibers that really um, get the best of both worlds?
For me, I find a substantial sweet spot between 25 and 284. So you're looking at 25 caliber to 7mm for you guys that know the 7 MMO8, 284, 277. So like a 270, for example.
Yep.
That's one that's not really played with too frequently. Not a great selection of bullets in 270 yet. But in terms of potential for good ballistics coefficient and good sectional density, 270 is in a really good spot. And we are starting to see some better bullets coming out. For me, in the deer woods, if you're looking for a deer woods side of it, I'm always going to preach the just praises for the 25 caliber bullets. Great example. I'm already on 25 caliber rifle bullets here. Let me go down here through the list and compare it to that 6.5 I have pulled up. If I can get Hornaday's page to load here. Yeah, there we go. They are making an A-tip match right now, so you can't hunt with that bullet. It is pulling a .350 G7. That's pretty substantial. Going back to the 6.5, That was, got to pull it back up because I don't remember that number off the top of my head. There's been talking too many numbers today. So the ELDX, which you can hunt with, you're looking at 0.315 coefficient. That's G7. Sectional density. Obviously, sectional density is going to be a little bit better with the 6.5 because a little bit bigger round. The number here is 0.293. Going back to the 25 caliber, it is, oh, would you look at that? It's 0.298. It's not actually better. That's where a lot of guys get confused. They think, you're getting into that ballpark of bullets being the same weight, the higher diameter must be better. It's not always, guys. A little bit better sectional density on the slightly lighter, lower diameter bullet. There's so much at play there. Once again, you can't hunt with that bullet, so is sectional density really that important? Probably not. Burger. This is where we start getting into some interesting stuff. Burger is now making a 25 caliber elite hunter bolt. It's 133 grain. That bullet, which I think is perfect. Sectional density is 0.288 on it. Now, you are a lower weight. That's why we're seeing that lower sectional density. It's still not far off from the 143 LDX. The sectional density, the ballistic coefficient is 0.315. What was the ballistic coefficient on that 6.5? Pretty sure it was the same number. I'm pretty sure it was 0.315 G7. It was 0.315. So you've got identical ballistics coefficients. Sectional density is a little bit lower on that bullet because it's just a bit lighter. But the velocity difference in the same size case, because the 25 Creedmoor is just 6.5 neck down, is substantial. And you can see that comparison across the entire lineup of cartridge cases. We'll go to 30 caliber in particular because most of these have some kind of lineup. The 30-06 versus the 25-06. 308 versus the 25 Super versus the 25 Creedmoor. That 25 is in a really good spot right now because they are designing bullets that are going to take advantage of it. 257 Weatherby Magnum versus the 300 Weatherby Mag. You're in a really good spot. But once we start seeing more stuff for the 270, and I think we're really going to start seeing it soon because the 277 Fury is using those diameter bullets. I think we're going to start seeing a lot of really nice 27 caliber stuff come out. And I think at that point, if 277 Fury, even if that in and of itself catches on, because it's 308, but with a 27 caliber bullet, that has been wildcatted. That's not ever been standardized. You skip that, go from 243 to straight to 7mm08. The 25 caliber in a 308 case and the 27 was never standardized. Once that void there is filled, that's going to catch on. It's going to be very popular. I can't say the 277 Fury is going to be it because of the military connotations behind it. Younger guys influencers are going to jump on it and be, oh, that's cool. Even just a brass case, getting away from the two-piece case. Fuds aren't. They're never going to adopt 277 Fury. Don't need that, Sonny.
Yeah.
But when we get in a point where we do see something designed, like maybe a 27 Creedmoor, um, that and I mean you're going to see some stupid PC bullets that are going to be possible. I promise you that.
Yeah. You touched on it. I think the quarter bore, the revolution for them is honestly, I think it's on the way. You're seeing a lot of like the 25 Creedmoor. Um, I saw the 250 Savage Ackley is kind of getting more love again, and you get into like the 25, the PRC, and you get like the 25 284. I mean, there's endless uh options there. I mean, I'd love to see the 257 Roberts really make a comeback. That's unfortunate, and like I'm looking into a 25-06 because I mean we were talking about that before, the versatility there. Then you have the sectional density, you have the ballistics coefficient. Not that I'm recoil sensitive, but I mean that 25-06 might be honestly that's an all-round gun for anything that I would want to do with it. I mean, it's flatter shooting than the aught six. You can get very much pretty close to the same performance. I mean, obviously you got more behind the 30-06 with that, but I don't know. There's definitely a lot of interesting stuff coming for the 25 calibers and that. I mean, I guess another one would be like the 25 by 47 Lapua. Like, there's a lot of endless options there that can be exciting, especially with more bullets development and more of that. And, even with the 270, that really, like you were saying, that has a lot of, there's nothing really there in that, like you were saying. Uh, there's a big gap there. And I mean, I think with the 6.8 Western, we've seen kind of some 270 caliber bullets with the long. I think they were doing the long copper one and like 180 grain. I think
Yeah.
they were doing one in 210 as well. That was a little bit bigger. That they were only putting in Browning, which I mean, 180 grain bullet for a 270 27 caliber. That's
Yeah, I mean,
unbelievable.
you're talking about a bullet.
Yeah. And then that's one that maximizes BC and also sectional density. I mean, the stuff that you're really seeing from that ammunition at the long distances on elk and stuff, but I don't know if I've ever seen those bullets to buy them to even want to even attempt to reload it. I don't think I've ever seen them. I don't know if the reloading components are quite there yet, but because only two companies are, well, under that umbrella of Browning and Winchester, they're the only ones really doing it. I don't know if but the other companies are really catching on a whole lot, but I guess we'll have to see.
So, and to that point too, this is where uh, the Burger really shines. Burger's kind of taking charge with these real high BC bullets, especially for hunting, because for you and me, that's really what's important. The bullet could have a 7,000 G7 PC and it's worthless to us if we can't use it to take game. Uh, at least in my boat right now, I
Yeah.
don't shoot any competition with any rifle that I'm not also going to go out and harvest game animal with.
Yeah.
And if I got one accurate load, I'm not screwing with another load just for competition. Uh, they have a 170 grain 270 bullet. That's their longest at this point. It is a .339 G7, which is pretty substantial. And the sectional density on it's 0.317. So it's still in that same ballpark of those, uh, like the higher end, heavier, longer 25 caliber bullet and the 6.5. Now, Berger does offer a 156 grain 6.5 bullet, which has a 0.347 G7 and a sectional density of 0.32. So right there, your sectional density is very small differences. The problem is that bullet is so heavy, you've got to have like a PRC or something with greater case capacity to take advantage of it. You try and slingshot that out of your Creedmoor, that 170, I can make that work in a standard 270 Winchester without a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and then if you, we talked about it last week with the 270. I mean, if you get a faster twist rate, you can stabilize, like you're saying, you can stabilize that no problem.
Yep.
I mean, if you go down to 1 and 8, 1 and 9, I think that's fast enough you could, but if, I mean, if you're going to go fast, you might as well take it right down to 1 and 7, right? A lot of people, I don't think, like going that fast, but
Most everything that I'm having built these days is in a 1 and 7 twist, primarily because it's typically the fastest twist rate I can get from a pre-made barrel manufacturer. My uh, 338 Federal, that's a 1 and a 6.5. McGowan at the time offered a 6.5 twist rate in your 338 caliber barrels. So that's what that's cut in. And to put that in perspective, the bullets I hunt with in that are FTX bullets. They're designed for the 338 Marlin. So these are lever gun bullets made to expand at lever gun velocities with lever gun twist rates. That bullet, I'm shooting them at 25 or 2,600 feet per second. I'd have to look at my book again. Uh, with that 1 and 6.5 twist rate, they hold up just fine. I mean, I've absolutely smoked 2 deer with that thing already, and just beautiful. I mean, the bullets don't catastrophically explode. Like, oh, yeah, spinning 1,000,000 miles an hour, it's going to explode like that. It's very comparable to what I'd see shooting out of the Marlin. Uh, the gun just has options because I got the 6.5 twist rate. I could go with some stupid bullet if I wanted.
yeah. Um, there's a lot of options for sure when you get into those faster twist rates, and um, I know that with my 280 Ackley, I think that has a 1 and 8. I think that's
I'm trying to remember at the time, 1 and 8 might have been the fastest offered in that caliber. So it's either 1 and 8 or a 7.5 when we
yeah,
put
and
that together.
that can stabilize a lot of like that's the numbers that can put out, and we'll have to do a video on that showing what that can do because that can really stabilize a lot of that can pump out the numbers, especially the reloads. Um, but it really it's really impressive what that 280 Ackley can do, and that's another one that can really take advantage of the both the BC and the SD, and because the 7 millimeter has a lot of great options for that, I think, for both of them, especially. I think the 7 Rem Mag is another one that, it's it's kind of a, could be the king of the Magnums for BC and ST.
It's right up there. I can certainly tell you that. There's obviously some stuff that'll beat it, like when you start getting into some of the Weatherby stuff.
Yeah.
Um, Now there again, you're limited by twist rates. So if you consider PRCs magnums now, you can get better results out of those because they are designed with a better twist rate in mind. But in terms of every day, I can find it everywhere. Magnum ammo, 7mm it's If it's not the top, it's in the top three.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the one that I really have been interested in, and I was looking at some of the numbers for it, the guys were getting and, putting on forums and stuff. And with a lot of that, not that a lot of those guys are lying or nothing, but sometimes on forums and stuff, the information that you find, you got to take it with a grain of salt. Especially some people like to exaggerate their numbers. I think they might look at what the reloading manual says, and it can be accurate. Sometimes, you got to look at that. There's a lot of guys who look at what the reloading manual says, at 2,800, but they don't consider the other factors of their barrel length. What kind of barrel are they using? What kind of rifle are they using? What are their conditions? What's their elevation? So, stuff like that. But is really the 300 Winchester short mag. The capabilities of that are really impressive.
The WSM, I know a lot of guys that are using that locally. So they're using it in the deer woods.
Yeah.
So more power to them, but it does work. It works really well. You've got close to full magnum power. Its numbers aren't off by a terrible amount. But the big thing is the action length. You, you can have a substantially lighter package. And because the case capacity is lower and the case design's different, you can get some pretty good velocities out of a shorter barrel too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of, and after last week, it's funny. I think the phones and stuff they listen as the seven backcountry really started popping up, and
Yeah.
the stuff that the videos I was watching, they were saying, I think backfire, like you were talking about him. He was saying, no, this is going to be great for ballistics coefficient and sectional density. And I thought, well, you're only shooting paper. How can you really speak to the efforts of it in the woods? I mean, not saying that it's not. I'm sure it will be a killer for sure. But and then Ron Spomer posted one with Joseph Von Benedict, and here Joseph Von Benedict says in that video that him and his daughter have both taken game with the 7mm backcountry.
Oh
So
my God.
so I'm thinking like it just came out. Obviously, those guys they get it early and they get to test it, and their
Must
feedback
have, must have got away early.
yeah, their feedback is greatly appreciated, I'm sure, by Federal and that. I mean, I know in the 6.8 Western, those guys all had it in their hands early, and Ron Spomer said he gave a lot of great feedback on that to them. But I don't know. I can shoot at paper all day long. I can look at the chronograph and get the numbers, but it doesn't tell me all I need to know from a sectional density perspective until I get out into the woods. And I mean, I think that's one thing we should always consider because a lot of guys, they look off the box and that's what they want to go by, and then they listen to the claims that some of these rifle cartridges, they make. Like you listen to a guy tell you about the 6.5 Creedmoor. Here I go again, knocking on those guys, but they'll tell you that that's the greatest rifle ever made, and you don't need anything else. And then you get the guy who goes out and he buys a box of ammunition that's match grade because it's whether it be more expensive, it might have like nozzlers might obviously they probably are looking at certain you know Burger Barnes whatever. Maybe probably shouldn't put Barnes in that category because you'll find
Yeah.
grapes you're not gonna run into issues. But I think like sometimes like if you buy the wrong box of Nosler, oh you just figure it's 100 and 45 grain or 150 grain, but if it doesn't have the expansion power, you can't I mean, numbers can tell you one thing, but I like to ethically put that deer down. That's what tells me what I want to like, what I like to know. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like numbers as much as the next guy. That's what my profession is all about numbers and that. But you got to look at it from a perspective of like a practical application. Are you going to drop that deer or that coyote or that elk in a ethical way, in a manner that it's not only ethical from a shooting perspective, but there's no suffering. I mean, obviously, you can't always control that because they might get a breath of air, they can take off or whatever. And, but it's just, I don't know, certain things you have to really consider when you're looking into that stuff. And if you're not testing it and if you're not doing your research on a bullet, things can go south in a quick manner. And I think that's the importance of a topic like this because you have a lot of interesting information to keep in mind because it's not all about ballistics coefficient, it's not all about sectional density, finding a good mix between the two, finding the right bullet, finding the right caliber for your application, and then you can go have some fun in the woods or go to the old Creedmoor range and shoot your 6.5 Creedmoor with your man bun or your taking your Uncle Fudd for the I gotta stop. I'm sorry.
I can hear the dislike button being clicked right now.
Yeah.
No, and on that note too, I just recently saw this, and I thought it's a great thing to bring up. Have you ever heard of Ian McCullum?
Yes.
So he's the guy that runs Forgot Weapons channel
Yes.
here. He recently did it might even be two videos. The guy he's a good shot. Like he reviews firearms, he shoots them religiously, does competitions. He does stuff for fun that just guys take so seriously. Like backup gun matches. He shot one with a 45 Win Mag Willity Survivor, right? Just cool stuff. But he's got a video or two up now where he decided he wanted to go hunting. So, obviously, Ian is big in YouTube, big in the gun industry. He's got some money to throw around. He found this place, I think it was somewhere out west, that you pay them and they will take you on a hunt and they teach you everything from uh, animal anatomy to, trying to figure out what caliber and stuff you need for what you're doing and your distances to shooting the animal, ethically putting it down, how to process the animal and cook it. A whole field to table class that these guys run. And what his videos on it really show just how substantially different the target disciplines are to hunting.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely like um an important thing is like if somebody has the means, the financial means to go through that, um, if they want to do one of that something like that out in Wyoming on a pronghorn, I would be interested because I want to go on a pronghorn hunt. But I think that's the great side of like going hunting, especially with guides or sportsmen who value that is you can learn the not maybe not the anatomy of it, but where to perfect shot placement and the processing of the gutting and the all of that and how to you know break it down to bone it because there's a lot of guys who and even that's a lost art anymore is there's even around here there's not many people that I know that process their own deer. They run it up to the Amish or they run it to the local butcher shop and I'm happy to say that me and my family when we are lucky enough to get deer we do all that ourselves because we enjoy doing it. It's I like there's a little bit more peace of mind, in my opinion, than it's sitting at an Amish shop. What are they doing?
Yeah.
Is it sitting? Is it sitting on their their ground floor? I don't know, but just stuff like that of knowing that stuff is important, and it opens up opportunities. Not that I'm gonna show people how to gut a deer on YouTube. It's a quick way to get a YouTube channel shut down, but but stuff like that is shot placement and like all the hunter safety courses will teach you that. But there's some guys who have been through hunter safety courses who I think they forget it the day they walk out of it. But
Yeah. Well, you're not wrong there either.
yeah, but
All the guys doing it online now too. You can get through the course in 2 hours. You
yeah,
have your certificate printed in hand in 2 hours.
yeah. I know when I went through it, it was like a 3 day thing. You went up, sat through it, then like so much the first day, and then the second day you all lined up and you carried the wooden gun. It's like the one dimensional thing, and then the third day you learn more, and then you took the test, and it was very educating. And I heard something somewhere that a lot of the hunter safety course nowadays, at least in Pennsylvania, they cut out a lot of the trapping because it's kind of going down, which is another thing that's disappointing. Like, not that I don't trap as really anymore, but there's a lot of stuff that you can really, there's a lot of value there, and they just, I don't know, they're getting lazy.
Yeah, and that's the unfortunate thing about. I know, like we were talking about small game hunting's dying. Really, I mean, how many guys hunt squirrel and groundhog anymore? It's guys I know hunting groundhog are shooting them for pest control. They're not actually hunting them. They're just exterminating the animals.
Yeah, that's I was actually talking about that yesterday with somebody about groundhog hunting and looking for places to go because you're a farmer's your best friend. They don't want that groundhog digging up holes for their beef or whatever to step in. Your neighbor with a pond, man, that who has a bunch of groundhogs on his lane, that's your best friend. Once they start digging around them ponds and all that stuff, well, but there's very few people. Like I think from a squirrel perspective, I love squirrel. It's right up there with any meat I've ever eaten. Same with groundhog if it's prepared the right way. That's a delicacy. But same with rabbits the same way. It's it's really 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 good stuff, and not that the BC of a shot shell really matters when it comes to a rabbit. I know sectional density, you get a little bit of there, but there's just so much stuff that is the old and I'm as much as I pick on the 6.5 Creedmoor guys, I'll pick on the Fuds too because I like to think I'm in the middle between them. But I mean, a lot of the older guys they had it right with small game hunting. I'd rather small game hunt any day over deer hunting any day. And a lot of people look at me like I'm crazy when I say that, but I don't know. I just get more out of it. I enjoy it more peaceful. I don't have all the stress of looking for a big buck.
Yeah,
I don't have all the stress of, oh, if I make a bad shot on that deer, if I make a bad shot on on a squirrel or something or a rabbit, I miss it. So, I don't have to worry about, killing it because I missed it. Your room for error is obviously smaller, but I don't know. There's a lot of great opportunities for small game, and that's another thing with the groundhogs. They're open season. I mean, from spring to summer or to fall, whenever you want one, you can go find one. That's, there's so much there that I think people really miss out on, and that might be another thing for the summer is putting up some groundhog hunts because showing people the way of like what you're missing out on, and there's just so much there, I think.
Yeah, throw a couple of good recipes in the mix too when you do bag them.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, the recipes, that's important because not so much squirrel because there's a lot of great ways to prepare a squirrel. But the groundhogs, they're a little tricky because they can get tough pretty quick.
Yep.
And but if you do it the right way, they're tasty. They're right up there. Same same with the rabbit, but I think people are a little more keen on eating rabbit than squirrels and groundhogs, unfortunately. But I mean that's less of them around there for me to get, but I'll gladly take the groundhogs if people don't want them. Hey, if they're looking for to get rid of them, I'll gladly come shoot them for, and it's not just not just exterminating them, which eating them is perfect for me. But is there anything we missed on the topic of ballistics coefficient and sectional density?
I think we pretty much covered everything important. The big takeaway is, guys, you really got to figure out what your application is before you start deciding on how those numbers are going to affect you. Uh, what range you're going to be hunting at or target shooting at, what you're going to be hunting if you're hunting, because you might need more penetration on a bigger animal. Once you have all those details down, then it's time to start looking at the numbers and figuring out what is going to actually work for you.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, and that's with anything like not just ballistics coefficient, but from a cartridge standpoint too. Make sure whatever you're doing, make sure it's first of all legal by your
Yes.
jurisdiction. They vary state to state, county to county, municipality to municipality. First is legal. It's safe and it's ethical. Obviously, that's the endorsement of the day: is doing things first legally, second safely, third ethically, in that order. Because if you don't have the first legally, you're not safely and you're not ethically. So, um, but yeah, and like I mean, I know if I go 300 miles west to Ohio, my options for shooting get very like certain places over there, no rifles. You have to, if you're down to black powder, you're down to shotguns. There's so much stuff, just by going, even going 50 miles from to another county, you can change drastically on what you're, especially the time of year. But yeah, it's really just looking at what you're doing and doing it safely, doing it for fun, and doing everything legally because don't want to have somebody watch this and go out and do something and then they say, "Oh, those guys told me to do this." Well, everything has to be legal, everything has to be safe and ethically. But I think that's probably a good place to stop. I think that really went well, and hope everybody who tunes in gives some feedback in the comments. They like it, they subscribe, they let us know what you think of it, and put some topics down below that you want to hear about. And it's everything firearms, so it's everything from rifles, shotguns, handguns, I guess concealed carry even. I'm not very well versed on that topic because I'm not the best handgun shooter. Will ever claim to be a good handgun shooter, but there's a lot of stuff that we can always talk about. It's a lot of everything's fun to talk about when it comes to shooting, reloading, hunting, self-defense, carrying. There's a lot of avenues we can go down, and I'm open for anything as long as it makes sense and it's not a ridiculous trolling comment. There might be some of them popping up from some of the 6.5 Creedmoor guys. Yeah, I gotta. I'll stop there with them. The the like button's already exceeded 1,000 dislikes. But well, once again, thanks for tuning into this one. It's been a lot of fun, and we'll see you on the next one.